Joseph Smith claimed to have been visited by an angel who called him by name and said God had a work for him to do, that his name should be had for good and evil among all nations, kindreds, and tongues, or that it should be had for good and evil among all people. This was quite a claim from such an uneducated, disadvantaged person as Joseph was, but Joseph undertook this work. And whether it was of his own device or of divine power, one cannot objectively deny that Joseph Smith left a powerful legacy in his wake. There are three elements to this legacy. First, Joseph Smith challenged prevalent Christian beliefs. Second, Joseph led his people through sore adversities. And third, Joseph founded a world-scale religious empire. It is no doubt both good and evil are spoken of Joseph. He understood this would be the case. Why? Because he would challenge prevalent Christian beliefs. It is extremely difficult to find objective sources on Mormonism, but I think I did at diffin.com in an article, Mormonism versus Christianity. An all-inclusive list of Joseph's beliefs would be exhaustive, but some of the more prevalent ones include apostasy and restoration, claim that no church on earth at the time was true, direct revelation from God, the nature of God and Jesus Christ, and perhaps the most controversial was the nature and destiny of man. Joseph attributes his beliefs to direct revelation from God and not from interpretation of the Bible. He says of his time, the different teachers of religion understood the same passages of Scripture so differently as to destroy all confidence in settling the matters by appeal to the Bible. The truth is, though, that Joseph Smith's beliefs can be cited in the Bible in verses left unexplained by many Christian churches. They are far out of line with prevalent Christian beliefs, and he was very daring for having those beliefs. I will demonstrate how daring he was. The history of the church documents some of his experiences early in the church. Joseph faced severe opposition as a youth. He was publicly railed as a teenager in religious congregations. He recalls it strange, the attention that such a boy could get from the many great ones of the religious sects of the day. Joseph, throughout his life, was incarcerated several times, tarred and feathered, and ultimately killed for his beliefs, as were many of his followers. One could merely echo his words in considering the profound effect such a boy could have nearly 200 years later. This truly contributed to his legacy. I have demonstrated how Joseph's challenge to prevalent Christian beliefs was daring and contributed to his legacy. My second point has to do with his leadership in faith. Joseph led his people through sore adversities. A strong indication of Joseph's leadership is found in Joseph Smith history, which documents his life. Joseph was dedicated to his cause. He said, a religion that does not require the sacrifice of all things never has the power sufficient to produce the faith necessary unto life and salvation. And he sacrificed. He sacrificed his life ultimately. In the meantime, he was persecuted throughout it, and he endured mobs trying to kill him, legal harassments, and betrayal of his closest friends. His family also endured many trials. His wife along with him. They lost friends to mobs, they lost children to illness, and ultimately they lost time together in this life. Joseph's dedication defies all worldly reason and truly contributed to his legacy. Another indication of Joseph's leadership was his inspiration. He inspired from a humble beginnings of 6 souls in the founding of the church. It has evolved into millions of followers committed to his teachings. At the time, his leadership was nothing less than decisive and risky, even through failed ventures he inspired the saints to persist on. They endured mobs and massacres and extermination orders. This people, through his inspiration, endured persecution comparable to anyone else in the history of America. His inspiration continued even after his death, when they endured their hardest times migrating to the West. And his inspiration continues today. It is the faith of millions of people, scientists, authors, inventors, professionals that you may know and respect are of this faith and inspired by Joseph Smith. Joseph truly has the characteristics of a leader by any definition. Joseph led his people through sore adversities. Now, I've described how Joseph created this legacy. I've yet to describe the legacy itself. Nels Nelson was a writer at the late 19th century at Brigham Young University. He wrote a book entitled Scientific Aspects of Mormonism, or Religion in Terms of Life. He opens his book with a quote that illustrates illustrates an external view of the church given by a local minister. It is not to be educated, not to be reformed, not to be civilized. It must be crushed. No organization is so perfect as the Mormon Church, except the German Army. And this still rings true today, except the German Army part. The organization from the top down enlists each member to specific duties. Those duties are universally defined with boundaries and established leadership and instruction. The doctrine of the church is universal throughout the world. In fact, on any Sunday, you could go into any building and likely hear the same lesson. The church efforts yields vast quantities of food and other resources available to those in need, both members and non-members. Members of the church are among the first to arrive in disasters. This church is truly superior in function and with inestimable resources. And speaking of those resources, an article in Time magazine by David Van Beem entitled Kingdom Come measured the prosperity of the church in 1997. At the time, it was the 7th largest church in America with 4.7% growth annually. Outside of this nation, the population was equal to that and the growth rate was double. At that rate, the church would equal over 260 million members within this century. Assets of the church equaled or estimated at around $30 billion and have since doubled since that article was created. The church is perhaps the largest non-public welfare program with ranches and farms and communal stores for distribution. Per capita, it is perhaps the wealthiest church in America. Brigham Young, Joseph Smith's successor, once said in a time of strife that the people of the church would be tried with riches as they would become the richest people in the earth. And the work continues. If Joseph continues to be correct, his creation will cover the world. Both good and evil spoken among all nations was quite a claim from such a boy, but it continues to be true. And at the rate it's growing, it could yet be fulfilled. Joseph Smith left a powerful legacy in his wake by challenging prevalent Christian beliefs, leading his people through sore adversities, and founding a world-scale religious empire.